Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions. And the first portfolio is Deputy First Minister Responsibilities, Economy and Gaelic. I would remind members that questions 1 and 5 are grouped together and that I'll take therefore any supplementaries on these questions after both have been answered. At question 1, I call Alec Riley.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the progress that it is making in supporting the Fife Council-led Mossmorton Task Force.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the Scottish Government is participating in the task force led by Fife Council, and my officials are engaging regularly with Fife Council and other partners. Our priority has been to ensure we provide the necessary support for the workforce to transition to other employment opportunities, and I believe that it's vital that the task force is fully focused on mitigating the impact of this decision.
Alec Riley.
Can I ask the Deputy First Minister, the task force, as I understand it, will meet on the 28th of this month in Fife, the first meeting. Does the Scottish Government believe that there is an industrial future for the Mossmorton site once we get past rightly supporting the workforce that are there? And has the Scottish Government had any talks with the UK Government, as we will need both to invest in the area if we are going to secure long-term employment for the Cowdenbeath area?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I do firmly believe that there is an industrial future for the plant, and I say that for a number of reasons. Firstly, the funding that was announced yesterday means that there will be up to £9 million of funding over the next few years for the site. Secondly, Scottish Enterprise have been engaged very closely with ExxonMobil in order to understand what the opportunities are. I met with ExxonMobil yesterday afternoon to listen to them and get an update from their perspective about what is being provided to Scottish Enterprise, and those talks are progressing well. So I think there are opportunities to progress. We continue to make the case to the UK Government for additional support, but in the meantime, rather than waiting for anything, we have progressed our own activity to both make funding available, which I was delighted about, and also to support Scottish Enterprise with the work they're doing to essentially match assets and land that is available at the site with potential employers who have expressed an interest either through the Grangemouth process or separately to that.
Question number 5, Matt Roscoe.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions the Deputy First Minister has had with ministerial colleagues regarding when a Just Transition Fund for Mossmorton will be introduced.
Deputy First Minister.
In yesterday's budget, we announced £9 million over the next 3 years to help mitigate the closure impacts and to support a just transition for the skilled workforce.
Mark Roscoe.
Well, can I thank the Deputy First Minister for that answer? I'm very pleased about what was announced in the budget yesterday. Of course, I've been calling for such a fund for many years. However, given the plant is scheduled to close in 4 weeks' time, communities need to know when the fund will be up and running. And while £3 million a year is a good starting point, it doesn't fully address the problems that are left behind by ExxonMobil's decision. There must be a full positive legacy for both communities and workers. So can I ask what steps the Government will be taking to help leverage more funds, not just from the UK Government, but also from ExxonMobil itself, of course, who made substantial profits from the operation of Mossmorton over many decades?
Deputy First Minister.
I commend the member for his long-standing interest in the plant, and in terms of his specific questions, he talked about the contribution from others, and certainly my ambition would be to use that £9 million of funding as leverage for further funding from the private sector, particularly those investors or developers or businesses that are looking for an opportunity to relocate, to use either the assets at the site or the land at the site. Secondly, we have had some engagement, as I said, just in the last 24 hours with the company themselves, looking at what could be available soon, and also what commitment they are making to legacy. And I think Mark Ruskell will recall the conversation that we started to have at the summit back in November about legacy, and I certainly think there's an openness to explore those questions about legacy. My last point is just the member mentioned the issues in 4 weeks, and obviously this does have a longer tail than that, so we're conscious that there will still be some activity ongoing for quite a considerable time. So it does allow us an opportunity to continue to explore these options and to deliver solutions as quickly as possible.
I have obviously had quite a number of members seeking to ask a supplementary. I shall try to get them all in, but we will need to see briefer questions and briefer responses. David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given the owners of ExxonMobil were clear Westminster policy was to blame for the closure of her site, can the Cabinet Secretary provide an update on the Scottish Government's engagement with the UK Government on Scotland's industrial future at Mossmorton, and can she also update on the engagement with trade unions throughout the task force?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I have been engaging with the trade unions and worker representatives. I met the trade unions in December, just shortly before Christmas, and yesterday I met with the worker representatives as well, and we'll continue to engage with them and also to communicate with MSPs as well. In terms of some of these policy changes, we haven't seen any change from the UK Government on those particular policies, and the risk for all of us is that if there is no further changes, then there is ongoing risk of industrial failure in other parts of Scotland.
Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This morning, this Parliament's Economy and Fair Work Committee heard evidence from trade unions about their concerns about the deindustrialisation of the Scottish economy, of which the closure of Mossmorton is the latest example, and also their concern that we have well-paid workers in the oil and gas sector currently losing their jobs when the vacancies simply do not exist in the new green economy in terms of renewables that will allow them then to progress in a just transition. So where's the Scottish Government's skills strategy to ensure that those workers not losing their jobs at the moment are thrown on the scrap heap?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I think in taking those points in turn, if Murdo Fraser, as I'm sure he has, looked at any of the commentary from employers who have regretfully had to relieve workers of their jobs in the North East and the oil and gas industry, all of them cite the Energy Profits Levy. Now, it's quite clear to me, and I think it now is to the Conservatives, that the Energy Profits Levy is having an extremely damaging effect on the ability to retain workers. So the whole point of a just transition is that new jobs should be created before old ones are lost. So the two arguments there is to retain the old jobs and to create new ones. In terms of the deindustrialisation, I said in response to David Torrance that if there is no fundamental change to some of these policies, and these policies are largely determined on a UK-wide basis when it comes to key industrial policies, particularly around energy, the cost of doing business and so on. So we do need to see a fundamental shift, and we need to see it quite soon. He may also be conscious of the outcome of auction round 7 today in terms of creating new jobs, but we really need to see that accelerate and more momentum.
Okay, I can take 2 more, but I need briefer questions and briefer responses. Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Deputy First Minister, given that this government has slashed the budget of Fergus Marine by 57%, does this not send a pretty stark warning to communities around Mossmorton about how little they can rely on this government when it comes to long-term support, interventions and transition funding?
Deputy First Minister.
I'm not sure I heard the member correctly, mostly because I was just so astonished by his question. I think he asked why we'd slashed the budget of Ferguson Marine. Is that correct? Which is obviously quite surprising, considering the Conservatives regularly criticise me for investing in Ferguson Marine. So I think you can look at our track record of stepping in to save key industrial assets and stand on that when it comes to the future.
Brief supplementary, Paul McLennan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Despite a challenging UK policy environment, Scotland continues to do all it can to preserve skills, protect jobs and deliver a truly just transition. Does the CABSEC agree that in order for that to happen, the UK Government must start delivering north of the border? And can she provide an update on the Scottish Government's work to secure a future for the site?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, in terms of the funding that we have provided, £25 million Grangemouth Just Transition Fund, we've invested £8.5 million to date to bring forward new business opportunities to secure Grangemouth's transition, and we're also examining every option alongside Scottish Enterprise to ensure a just transition for the workforce and the site at Mossmorran, and we look to the UK Government to do the same, and the member will have seen the £9 million announcement yesterday, which includes £3 million for next year to provide support for any new employers moving into the site.
Question number 2, Graham Simpson.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government under what circumstances it expects to be able to return Ferguson Marine to the private sector.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the member will know my approach is to ensure that MV Glen Rosa moves towards completion, that we support the company, Ferguson Marine, to be as competitive as possible by investing capital and supporting them as they tender for new opportunities. And we have no immediate plans to return Ferguson Marine to the private sector in advance of those steps being taken.
Graham Simpson.
Well, can I thank the Deputy First Minister for that answer, but just if I could follow up on the answer, I wonder if she could set out a timescale for returning Ferguson Marine to the private sector. Is it going to be months or is it going to be years? You know, what's her expectation here? And when it is finally sold, how will the government protect jobs and skills in Inverclyde during any transition to private ownership?
Deputy First Minister.
Very clear, my immediate priority is to safeguard the yard, safeguard the jobs and to ensure that it can compete on the open market and there are no immediate commitments to return it to the private sector.
And supplementary, Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, President Officer. The Deputy First Minister and the Chamber will be very much aware that the yard was in private ownership when it went into liquidation in 2014, so private ownership is not the panacea that some might suggest. But does the Cabinet Secretary and Deputy First Minister agree with me, however, that the most important aspect for the yard is that it actually has a future, it builds ships, it creates opportunities and contributes to the economy irrespective as to who owns the yard?
Deputy First Minister.
I agree with the member on both the commitments that he's just listed there, but also the fact that ownership itself is not the defining issue, and what matters most is that the yard has a clear and sustainable future and is able to continue to build ships. We want to support the highly skilled workforce at the yard and to ensure the business is placed on a stable footing, and those are my immediate priorities.
Question number 3 was not lodged. Question number 4, Fulton McGregor.
To ask the Scottish Government what actions it is taking to encourage young people to be involved in the Gaelic language and culture.
Deputy First Minister.
Where we're fully committed to increasing young people's involvement in Gaelic language and culture, and in order to achieve that, a range of opportunities exist in schools, in media, in arts and culture and outdoor activities. The Scottish Government's funding of, for example, MG Alpa, Borshna Gaelic and Sol Morostig makes that possible.
Fulton McGregor.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. I've recently been speaking with early years practitioners at a local nursery who tell me a concern that they have just now is getting Gaelic-speaking early years practitioners. Now, I appreciate this might not be the Cabinet Secretary's direct portfolio, more an education matter, but can I ask what steps the Government are taking more generally to encourage Gaelic-speaking people to consider early years and other care-based roles and professions more generally?
Deputy First Minister.
This is one of our priorities precisely for the reason that Fulton McGregor sets out, in that there has been a huge increase in demand for Gaelic early learning and childcare and Gaelic medium education, and it's important to ensure that there is also a pipeline of teachers and practitioners to support that. So we continue to work particularly with providers of education like Sol Morostig to ensure that there is a pipeline, but my encouragement is always to any young person who is considering what to do next to consider a career in Gaelic medium education.
Question number 6, Annie Wells.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to improve Glasgow's economic performance in light of reports that the city continues to lag behind the rest of Scotland.
Minister Richard Lockhead.
Glasgow has seen sustained growth with one of the highest
GVA growth rates of any local authority area over the last 5 years, also the most foreign direct investment projects in 2024, and compared with 2010, the highest business stock growth rate in Scotland as well. We have played our part by helping to stimulate this growth through the £500 million City Regional Deal, alongside Clyde Mission funding, Maritime Skills funding, the Regional Investment Zone and national support via the Scottish National Investment Bank and TechScaler and other initiatives. A recent announcement committing to introduce legislation which enables greater regional empowerment will also provide further support and ensure Glasgow City region continues to flourish.
Annie Wells.
Thank the Minister for that answer. Business growth is down, Minister, private sector investment is down and employment levels are still below the national average. And companies like Spuds in the West End of Glasgow are closed just after 5 months. And the businesses I'm speaking to feel let down by this Scottish Government, and they just feel as if they've been left behind. So they're wanting to ask, what will the Scottish Government do to help fix this immediate decline in Glasgow? I mean, I don't know if you've been in Glasgow recently, but there's a lot of disinvestment now in Glasgow. So I would wonder what the immediate actions the Minister could do to help businesses flourish.
Always to the Chair. Minister.
I am of course aware that Glasgow, the same as many other communities in Scotland, is not immune to some of the economic pressures at the moment facing Scotland and across these islands. And of course many of the UK Government's policies are taking their toll as well, like higher national insurance contributions, higher energy costs and so on and so forth. They're impacting Glasgow businesses as well as the rest of the country as well. But we should note there are reasons for optimism. I mean, the recent Global Financial Centres Index ranks Glasgow alongside some of the world's top performing cities now. Glasgow now ranks 37th globally and 12th in Western Europe, and it's made consistent steady progress compared to just the last year or so of that survey alone. There are plenty of indicators showing that Glasgow has many strengths, and it's really important we talk the city up. But of course there are challenges, and it's important we do work together to address those challenges. We'll continue to do that, and of course yesterday's budget has a lot of measures in it that will support Glasgow going forward as well.
Supplementary, Daniel Johnson.
Annie Wells is right to ask the question about Glasgow, because output per hour worked in Glasgow is a third less than Edinburgh. But worse than that, looking at Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester, those cities since 2019 achieved an annualised growth rate of 3%. Glasgow has been barely 1%. Looking past the issue of mayors, it's clear combined authorities with powers over skills, transport, infrastructure, housing and rates, that's what delivers growth. I don't think that putting regional economic partnerships on a statutory footing delivers that, will it?
Minister.
Well, the member's not seen the legislation yet in terms of regional partnerships, which has been referred to by the First Minister just in recent weeks. So he should await the opportunity, if he's lucky enough to be re-elected to the next Parliament, to influence that legislation. But in terms of the Government's commitment, that commitment is there to strengthen regional partnerships and give flexibility to regional partnerships in Scotland, to allow them to bring forward their own initiatives to further support the local economies.
Question number 7, David Russell.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to address the rates of young people not in education, employment or training.
Minister Richard Lockhead.
A range of support is provided to support young people to help them to transition into positive destinations of education, employment or training. This includes professional careers advisors who provide impartial advice so that young people can make informed decisions, having explored all the options, also funding programmes connecting young people and employers, and provision, of course, of employability support. And for the 23-24 school leaver cohort, 95.7% were in a positive initial destination 3 months after they left school, and the 24-25 figures will be published on the 24th of February of this year.
David Russell.
I thank the Minister for that answer. However, the figures hide the fact that happen solely through improvements in the rates of teenagers remaining in education, something many of us in this chamber actually support, however, but economic inactivity among those days between 20 and 24 remains at 15%, which is the same as since 2017. Does the Minister agree with me that strategies implemented so far have obviously not gone far enough to allow young people of backgrounds and capabilities that step to the workforce, contribute to the economy and to be self-sufficient, at the same time have a wee bit of pride in themselves?
Minister.
Well, it is of course important that we make relevant and effective support available to Scotland's young people as well. I should point out that from 2009-10 to 23-24, the proportion of school leavers entering positive destinations has increased from 85.9% to 95.7%. So that progress, I think, should be recognised and does vindicate to a certain extent the policies that have been implemented over the past decade and indeed longer than that. And in 23-24, as I said before, the overwhelming majority of those who entered a positive initial destination went on to sustain these positive destinations going forward as well, 95.5% as well. And I should also say that the latest estimates from the ONS annual population survey show that Scotland had a higher employment rate, lower unemployment rate and lower inactivity rate for 16 to 24-year-olds when compared to the rest of the UK as a whole. So, of course, we have to be alive to those challenges the member mentions, but I do think that the policies that have been implemented in recent years and continue to be implemented are having a very positive effect in supporting our young people.
Brief supplementary, Marie McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Minister how many people have benefited from free tuition here in Scotland under the SNP, and do you agree that protecting free tertiary education in Scotland is vital to creating opportunities for people across Scotland?
Always through the Chair. Minister.
Well, both members who have just spoken clearly have mentioned the importance of education, and Marie McNair is quite right to highlight the benefit of free higher education in Scotland. And indeed, analysis of data from the Student Awards Agency shows that around 740,000 students, that's 740,000 students, have benefited from free tuition fees and higher education courses between 2007-8 and 24-25. So our policy on free tuition ensures that access to education is based, as we've said many times before, on the ability to learn and not the ability to pay, and is playing a key role in supporting access to higher education, but also supporting our young people achieve positive destinations with their lives.
And brief supplementary, Liz Smith.
It's very good to see in table 9.01 in the Scottish Budget little extra money for employability schemes, which was a recommendation from Sandy Begbie's Developing Scotland's Young Workforce. But can I ask the Minister, when it comes to the enterprise, trade and investment budget, which is crucial for employers actually to take on these young people, that's been squeezed this time from 420 million down to 398 million. Can I ask why that is?
Minister.
Well, there's a whole range of budgets within the budget announced yesterday in Parliament, and if you look at the additional support for colleges, for instance, the substantial and additional investment for colleges, so you have to look at the budget yesterday in the round in terms of the support for both employers, as well as the £90 million employability budget, which the member referred to in her initial remarks as well. So this is an ambitious budget that's going to make a real difference to supporting our young people going forward.
Question number 8, Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, may I offer a humble, sincere and unqualified apology for not being present at the beginning of these proceedings. Got that over with. So, to ask the Scottish Government what discussions the Economy Secretary has had with ministerial colleagues regarding the potential economic impact of fully dualling the A96 in order to provide faster and safer transport links between the two key economic areas of North East Scotland and the Highlands, and to support the significant number of renewable energy sector jobs that it and Highlands and Islands Enterprise anticipate will be generated in the coming decades?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, we fully recognise the crucial role that transport infrastructure plays, particularly in terms of the A96 in supporting sustainable economic growth. Connectivity underpins so much of our economic growth and expansion. In terms of the A96, the Government's current position has not changed, still in support of full dualling of the A96, and is currently progressing the dualling process from Inverness to Nairn, including the Nairn bypass.
Fergus Ewing.
Does the Deputy First Minister not share, therefore, my disappointment that the Nairn bypass and the section of the A96 the Scottish Government has been committed to dual since 2011 is not included in the League 1 list of development projects, but is only in League 2 which means there is no money for the Nairn bypass this decade, something that I asked the Finance Secretary about yesterday, and she gave an extensively equivocal answer. Does the Cabinet Secretary not believe that this failure is completely at odds with what she has just said, namely the centrality of decent transport links to achieving the Scottish Government's economic ambitions?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, in terms of the member's point, it's important to state that work has begun in terms of the statutory procedures being completed, the land acquired, and funding is included in next year's draft budget to commence the delivery of advanced work for this scheme. In parallel to those advanced works, Transport Scotland is continuing to look at the most suitable procurement option for delivering the scheme. So in terms of the status in the infrastructure investment plan, investment in the trunk road network over the next 4 years, which has been confirmed, will allow us to make further progress on dualling the A96, including the Nairn bypass. And I think it's important that the Government is able to follow up with Mr Ewing in setting that out clearly so that he has the information that he is looking for.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. That concludes portfolio questions on Deputy First Minister responsibilities, economy and Gaelic, and we can now move on to the next portfolio, which is finance and local government. And at question number 1, I call Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with COSLA or Strathclyde Pension Fund directly regarding the levels of pension contributions requested from West of Scotland local authorities for the financial year 2026-27.
Minister Ivan McKee.
The Scottish Government has not discussed employer contribution rates in the local government pension scheme with COSLA or Strathclyde Pension Fund. Rates are a matter for the administering authorities and are certified by their actuaries at each fund valuation. Following the 2023 valuation, Strathclyde Pension Fund informed its local authorities of a 3-year package of rates payable from 2024-25. The rate for 24-25 and 25-26 was a significantly reduced 6.5% of pensionable payroll, with a rate of 17.5% applying in 26-27. Rates certified following the 2026 valuation will apply from April 2027.
Stuart McMillan.
Thank the Minister for that reply. And the Minister will be aware that the Strathclyde Pension Fund has a working target to ensure that it is 100% funded over the average future working lifetime of its active membership. The fund is currently estimated at being 174% funded as at March last year. So can the Minister clarify if there is a procedure to allow councils to release excess funds whilst not affecting the ability of the pension fund to meet its targets, as this money within the local government system could be better used at this time to allow councils to invest in local opportunities?
Minister.
I understand that the pension scheme regulations allow for a revision of contribution rates after they have been set, but it would require a change to the administering authority's funding strategy statement. It would be for Strathclyde Pension Fund Committee to decide whether this would be achievable or desirable. The strong funding position of the LGPS as a whole may provide a good opportunity to support the growth of Scotland's economy, and in our programme for government we committed to engage with the LGPS funds to explore investment possibilities. This work remains ongoing.
Question number 2, Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'll take a deep breath before I ask this question. To ask the Scottish Government, as part of the cross-government coordination of infrastructure, what discussions the Finance Secretary has had with ministerial colleagues on when a decision will be made on the design and construction of a new grade-separate junction on the A720 Edinburgh City Bypass at Sheriff Hall, including what cost revisions have been undertaken.
Cabinet Secretary Shona Robson.
The Scottish Government continues to support the promotion of improvements to Sheriff Hall roundabout as part of its £300 million commitment to the Edinburgh and South East Scotland City Region deal. I regularly discuss the Scottish Government's infrastructure and spending plans with ministerial colleagues to ensure that these are aligned. Latest discussions have focused on the spending review and the development of the recently published infrastructure delivery pipeline, which includes Sheriff Hall. As is the case for all other road infrastructure projects, the cost estimate for Sheriff Hall will be updated once the statutory process has been completed and in advance of procurement.
Miles Briggs.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Cabinet Secretary states that the Government is committed to the project. However, I've been trying to seek updates from several ministers on what these cost revisions will look like, and when motorists across Edinburgh and the Lothians and South East of Scotland will finally see this critical transport project start. Funding was secured as part of the Edinburgh City Regional Deal almost a decade ago now, and to date Scottish ministers have spent almost £6 million only on consultation. So given the Scottish budget yesterday contained £860 million in cuts to capital spending from plans the Minister herself outlined just 6 months ago, what assurance can the Cabinet Secretary give that resources will be made available to deliver the Sheriff Hall project, and a decision will be taken before the election in May?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first of all, on the availability of capital, of course, that is very, by and large, dictated with the capital that we receive through the UK Government, and unfortunately that is due to decline. However, let me say a couple of helpful things to Miles Briggs. So firstly, I want to assure the member that the Government remains absolutely committed to the City Region deal, which includes up to £120 million for the grade separation at Sheriff Hall roundabout, and is included, as I said earlier, in the infrastructure delivery pipeline. The financial risk for any cost over and above this figure lies entirely with Scottish ministers, not City Region deal partners, to give them that assurance. And I'd like to also reassure the member that the funding is included in the Scottish Spending Review to continue to make progress in delivering improvements to Sheriff Hall. And just finally, he asked about time frame. The construction of the proposed scheme can only commence if it's approved under the relevant statutory authorisation process, and thereafter a timetable for its progress can be set. But I'm sure the Minister will take an active interest in this with the Cabinet Secretary for Transport.
Supplementary, Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I too have a vested interest in the Sheriff Hall roundabout because the A7 from my constituency ends up at the Sheriff Hall. And I hear what the Cabinet Secretary has to say, and also what the Cabinet Secretary for Transport had to say on the 1st of December last year. So I still wait, and I'll be like Miles Briggs, keeping my eye on timetables. But can I ask if the Cabinet Secretary, at least the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, shall convey this to her, that in the interim there is a solution. There is a part solution here. As you approach the Sheriff Hall from the A7, it only becomes 2 lanes just as you get to the Sheriff Hall. So cars are bumping up onto what we might call hard shoulder or rough ground to make a sort of a second lane for themselves. It can be done. Currently, only 3 cars can get through if they're travelling west or going straight on. Doing that would ease pressure at the moment for that. Have Transport Scotland ever considered it, and if not, will they? Cabinet Secretary.
I'm not aware of whether Transport Scotland have considered that specifically, but the Cabinet Secretary for Transport is in the chamber, and I'm sure she's heard what Christine Graham has said, and I'm sure she can follow up with her directly.
Question number 3, Ash Regan.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will consider allocating ring-fence funding to local authorities in the 2026-2027 budget to ensure consistent provision of prostitution support and exit services across Scotland, in line with the joint Scottish Government and COSLA equally safe commitment to tackling commercial sexual exploitation.
Cabinet Secretary.
In addition to the funding we've provided to improve support to those with experience of commercial sexual exploitation through both the Delivering Equally Safe and the Victim-Centred Approach Fund, in yesterday's budget we announced that we will provide further funding of £400,000. This will support the implementation of our strategic approach to challenge demand for prostitution and improve support for those with experience of it.
Ash Regan.
I look forward to the details of that additional funding, but current funding is very fragmented and it doesn't align with Scotland's international human rights obligations or the government's stated aim to eradicate male violence against women or its own equally safe strategy with COSLA, which recognises prostitution as a form of violence. While the costs of violence against people in prostitution are continuing to escalate, a tiny fraction of that money that used instead as a proactive investment could deliver preventative, trauma-informed support and exit services. So will the Scottish Government finally meet its obligations to reduce the sex trade market through criminalising sex buyers and properly fund the support and exit recovery that exploited women and children across Scotland really need?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, look, in relation to the bill, as the member will know, the Minister for Victims and Community Safety outlined to the Criminal Justice Committee in November the position of the Government. Although the Scottish Government strongly supports the principle of legislating to criminalise those who purchase sex, we retain a neutral stance on the Prostitution Offences and Support Scotland Bill, and I know that there are a number of stakeholders that have voiced concerns about the safety of women, and it's paramount that legislation laid before Parliament must be safe for women involved and exiting prostitution. Now, in terms of the funding, as I said, the funding that I announced will help further support the implementation of the strategic approach, building on the work we began last year with Police Scotland. That involves developing local networks between justice and wider mainstream and specialist services, ensuring women can be signposted to local support. And this funding will help to pave the way for a wider pathway of support for women with experience of commercial sexual exploitation.
Question number 4, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how much the UK Government's increase in employer national insurance contributions has cost local government in Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government have published an estimate provided by COSLA of an increase of £240 million for local authorities in Scotland in the financial year 2025-26, following the UK Government's hike in employer national insurance contributions.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. That £240 million could have been invested in public services, like giving SNP-controlled Aberdeen City the ability to increase its anti-poverty fund, or to allow Tory-controlled Aberdeenshire to reverse its daft decision to stop supplying grit bins. Is the Scottish Government still pursuing and pushing the Labour UK Government to fund these ENIC rises for public services in full?
Cabinet Secretary.
I can assure Kevin Stewart that yes, we are continuing to pursue the UK Government over the cost of ENICs. As I've said many times in this chamber, across the whole of the public sector, there is a £400 million a year gap between the funding provided and the cost for employers' national insurance contributions. It's an issue I've raised regularly with the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, and one that I will continue to pursue.
And supplementary, Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Last year's national insurance hike showed Labour's utter disregard for jobs and economic growth, and the Minister is right in saying that this has negatively impacted the public sector as well as the private sector. But as councils grapple with these costs, yesterday's Scottish Budget and Spending Review dealt them another blow. Today, the IFS says that the finance and local government portfolio uplift is just 0.3%, far less than the 2% claimed by Shona Robertson yesterday. And in future years, the local government portfolio will see real-term cuts of 2.1% annually. So, Minister, how are councils meant to meet these increased costs and deliver frontline services when this government is intent on slashing their budgets?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, local government's budget would be slashed if there was £1 billion to come out of public services, which the Tories have advocated. You can't come here asking for more money for local government when you would take £1 billion out of public services. It's a ridiculous position to have. On the position of local government funding, the budget provides a further real terms increase in the local government settlement, delivering record funding of £15.7 billion, including £250 million of unrestricted general revenue grant. The overall settlement increases by £650.9 million. That's a cash increase of 4.3% or 2% in real terms compared to the 2025-26 draft budget. And by the conclusion of the 26-27 SBR, that is the estimate that the local government settlement will have increased by compared to the 2025-26 budget. Craig Hoy should go away and read the document properly.
Question number 5, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to assist businesses that have seen a significant proposed increase in rateable value as a result of the current revaluation for non-domestic rates.
Minister.
Valuations, of course, are carried out by independent assessors, and the average increase as a consequence of those valuations across businesses was 12.2% over that 3-year period. We do recognise, however, that while some ratepayers will see their values fall, a number will see significant increases, and that's how we've met with assessors and with business sectors to address those concerns, and it's why the draft budget set out our plans to lower the basic, intermediate and higher property rates for 26-27 and to provide transitional relief schemes worth more than £320 million to deliver support to those businesses who need it.
Murdo Fraser.
I thank the Minister for his response, but the business reaction to the budget yesterday in this respect has been absolutely furious. Comments from CAMRA, from the Nighttime Industries Association, from UK Hospitality, all say that the reliefs being announced yesterday will go nowhere close towards meeting the extra costs businesses will face as a result of this revaluation. So what more is the government going to do, or will it just sit there complacently and watch while businesses fail?
Minister.
Well, I've indicated what we are doing. We've got the £320 million in transitional reliefs, a total of £860 million in reliefs for businesses across the piece in total. We recognise that some parts of some sectors do have specific challenges. We continue to engage with them and to meet with assessors to address those where necessary. But if you actually take a step back and look at the numbers here, the estimated revenues from NDR next year will be actually 6% lower in real terms than pre-COVID, which is a consequence of the steps we've taken to reduce that overall rates bill for businesses over that period. And as I say, the average increase across that 3-year period was only just over 12%.
Supplementary, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. Having lobbied the Finance Minister over many months to maintain the 100% rates relief for island-based hospitality and retail businesses, can I firstly welcome confirmation of that extension of that provision in yesterday's budget. But as my colleague Jamie Green highlighted yesterday, further targeted support is still needed. The Association of Scotland Self-Caterers has voiced serious concerns about the 2026 valuation model, and in my own constituency, a local operator has reported a 270% increase in their rateable value. But the Minister will understand that this situation is unsustainable, and without further intervention, many small businesses face a cliff edge. So will he commit to engaging with the sector to put final protections in place?
Minister.
As I had indicated, that across the piece, the average over that 3-year period is just over 12% of an increase, but absolutely recognise there are specific examples where, for various reasons, businesses have seen significant increases. Now, we continue to engage with assessors, continue to engage with the business sectors most affected to find solutions, and we've put, as I said, more than £320 million into the relief package to support businesses that are impacted by those increases.
Question number 6, Ros McCall.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the request from the Scottish Retail Consortium, Go Forth Stirling Bid and other business improvement districts for Scotland to follow England and introduce a permanent business rate discount for all retail, hospitality and leisure premises.
Minister Ivan Mickey.
The draft budget, as indicated earlier, ensures that the revenues raised from NDR in 26-27 will be 6% lower in real terms than pre-COVID, an indication of the steps we've taken to reduce that rates bill impact on businesses overall. Around half of properties in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector continue to be eligible for 100% small business bonus relief, and a further 37,000 properties could benefit from the new 15% relief for retail, hospitality and leisure properties with a rateable value up to £100,000, and of course on islands, and the budget guarantees that support for the full 3 years of the revaluation.
Ros McCall.
5 of Scotland's largest business improvement districts, including Stirling in my region, warned prior to yesterday's budget that England's new permanent 10% business rates discount will make Scotland a materially more expensive place to do business, putting at risk sectors that employ 457,000 Scots. The Minister may well laud the meagre measures in the budget to support business, but as CAMRA has stated, transitional relief may sound good, but if this budget still means higher business rates bills than pubs are paying right now, then this will be the straw that breaks the camel's back for many hard-pressed licensees. So the current system from all avenues is becoming an existential threat to our town centres on this government's watch. So where's the creative thinking here, Minister? So can the government agree to freeze the non-domestic rates so that we can look at guidelines for the review and bring forward a joined-up approach to fair business taxation?
Minister.
Well, again, just to be clear on the facts here, we've got to mention a 10% relief. We've got 15% relief for those retail, hospitality and leisure businesses. As I've already said, we're putting £320 million into the transitional reliefs over that 3-year period, £860 million reliefs in total. And if you look at the commentary from businesses and business organisations, Scottish Chambers of Commerce has said that businesses can take heart from yesterday's Holyrood budget, which offered firms immediate relief from rising cost pressures, and it welcomed measures such as non-domestic rates relief. So that's words from business organisations to answer Ros McCall's point, and indeed Murdo Fraser's commentary earlier. So yeah, we're taking this, we're focused very much on working with businesses and business sectors to put in place steps where we can to address some of those increases. But as I say, across the piece, taking into account the relief package we've put in place, that is absolutely recognised as being a significant step by the Scottish Government.
Question number 7, Hamza Youssef, who's joining us remotely. Mr Youssef.
To ask the Scottish Government the impact of the proposed Scottish budget on the Government's international development efforts.
Cabinet Secretary.
20 years on from the start of our international development programme, the Scottish Government remains committed to this work. In the draft Scottish budget for 2026-27, published yesterday, we set out that at a time when others are stepping back from commitments to the world's poorest and most vulnerable, support for Scotland's International Development Fund and the Humanitarian Emergency Fund will grow to £16 million in 2026-27. We've also restated our ongoing commitment to climate justice, with over £12 million allocated in next year's budget to support vulnerable communities in the Global South, particularly women and young people.
Hamza Youssef.
I'm very grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for that response. In yesterday's budget, I was pleased to see that significant increase that the Cabinet Secretary mentions in the Scottish Government's International Development Fund. I was, however, disappointed, although not altogether surprised, to hear, particularly from the Tory frontbench, voices of opposition to helping the world's most vulnerable, such as those in Malawi. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that in a world that is riddled with conflict, poverty and climate-related disaster, that investment in the world's poorest speaks to a nation's character, values and even morality? And if so, will she reassure me that she will use her office and other ministers will use their office to urge the UK Government to reverse its disastrous decision to cut overseas aid worth billions of pounds, which is directly harming the poorest in the Global South?
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I absolutely agree with Hamza Youssef. I think the Scottish Government's continued support for international development and climate justice is an important way that Scotland demonstrates good global citizenship, and it is about our core values. At a time when so much is happening in the world, that support for international organisations, work that's going on the ground to help communities to help themselves is really important. And there was a time in this Parliament where that was a unanimous position, and it saddens me that there are some who have stepped back from our global requirements and obligations. The First Minister wrote to the UK Foreign Secretary on the 14th of December, raising his profound concerns about UK government aid cuts from 0.5 to 0.3 of gross national income by 2027-28, and he asked the Foreign Secretary to reconsider the reported proposed cuts to Malawi, the Scottish Government's partner country since 2005, and we continue to advocate to the UK Government on this issue.
Brief supplementary, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The announcement in the budget of the extra millions for external development has been allocated at the detriment of many local projects across my region of Mid Scotland and Fife. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to justify cutting funding streams for these vital projects, which are lifelines to many of my communities, in favour of grandstanding for overseas projects?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as I said earlier, that speaks volumes, does it not? And Alexander Stewart doesn't seem particularly bothered about the impact on local services and projects by the £1 billion of unfunded tax cuts that the Tories have provided. Imagine the impact on your local projects from £1 billion of unaffordable tax cuts. Maybe you should reflect on that before coming to this chamber criticising this government's decisions.
Members, all the shouting means that nobody can hear a word that anybody is saying, so I don't think, apart from anything else, it's a very productive way to proceed. At question number 8, I call Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support it provides to local authorities, including North Lanarkshire, that face significant PFI and PPP payment obligations, which are estimated to amount to approximately £26.6 million per year.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government provides funding and support to local authorities for payments relating to their PFI PPP contracts by way of the annual local government settlement. We were, of course, able to replace the UK's costly PFI with a more cost-effective alternative, which in turn has enabled us to build hundreds of new schools and substantively upgrade hundreds of others.
Claire Adamson.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The PFI legacy contracts agreed under previous Labour and Conservative governments still cost Scotland over £1 billion per year. One project in my area had an estimated value of £150 million, is now expected to have cost £764 million. Will the Cabinet Secretary give assurances that the Scottish Government will resist a return to PFI-style models, particularly in light of reports that UK Labour Government under Rachel Reeves may be considering similar schemes again?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, first of all, as I said, we're committed to ensuring that PFI contractual obligations are delivered and contracts are as affordable as they can be, which is why we asked the Scottish Futures Trust to support public bodies in optimising value for money from these contracts, and that has been quite successful, and that includes giving that expert advice to contract managers where appropriate. But PFI legacies, to be clear, have had, as Claire Adamson has said, has placed a huge burden on councils, and that's why in the 26-27 budget we provided local government with a further real terms increase and record funding. But it's also why we've delivered a more cost-effective alternative model, and going forward those are the models that we would look at, not the expensive PFI contracts of the past.
And very brief supplementary, Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Fiscal Commission has modelled that local government will receive a real terms budget cut of almost £500 million between 25-26 to year 2028-29. Can the Cabinet Secretary say what analysis has been done on the impact of North Lanarkshire Council's budget on that cut and councils across the rest of Scotland? Cabinet Secretary.
So, can I be clear again that by the conclusion of the 26-27 SBR, that we estimate that the local government settlement will have increased by at least £650 million compared with the 2025-26 budget because of the in-year transfers. That's what you have to look at. But it's the spending ability of local government has seen a real terms increase for the second year running. Those are the facts. That is the fact, and that has been set out to COSLA over the course of yesterday and today.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on finance and local government. Do I have a point of order from Fergus Ewing? Fergus Ewing.
Yes, Presiding Officer, thank you. May I seek your guidance in raising a matter that's come to my attention around about 1:45 by journalists who have advised that the Scottish Government representative have admitted to them that significant errors were made in the course of yesterday's budget statement and also in the associated documents. The error was that the Finance Secretary said in the course of her remarks, "We will take forward dualling of key sections of the A96. The commitment, however, should have been that we will take forward dualling of the whole of the A96. In the associated document, Presiding Officer, which is called Infrastructure Delivery Plan, in Annex B, the mistake is compounded because there is no reference to the whole of the A96, only to A96 dualling Inverness to Nairn, including Nairn bypass. I sought to raise this to the presiding officer's attention shortly before this session to give notice of this point of order. And what I'm seeking is guidance, I think, under chapters 13 and 14, of whether, given the Cabinet Secretary is present here, whether she can personally make a correction of what appears to have been a series of, if I may say so, schoolboy howlers, despite the fact that Transport Scotland, government officials and ministers should have been all over the detail of this vital document. And will the Cabinet Secretary issue a correction now, correct the official report, take whatever action is required to correct the government official document, and lastly, apologise to everyone, not least the readers of the Press and Journal, who quite rightly, as the Voice of the North reported, that the government is no longer committed to the A96. So, in raising this clarification, I perhaps unusually, Presiding Officer, may be doing the government a favour.
Thank you, Mr Ewing. That is obviously not a point of order, but your contribution is noted. Members, of course, will be aware of the various ways in which the record can be corrected. Obviously, as far as Scottish Government ministers are concerned, that has to be done as soon as practicable after becoming aware of the relevant question. I would say, in response to Mr Ewing's point about the Cabinet Secretary's presence in the chamber, that I do note that the Cabinet Secretary has pressed her button to seek to raise a point of order, but I would say that that has come after another member has pressed their button to seek to raise a point of order, and that is Douglas Ross. And I call Douglas Ross.
Fastest finger first, it seems, Presiding Officer, but this is actually an extremely important issue. So I'm pleased to be able to raise my point of order before the Cabinet Secretary, who is ready to read out a pre-prepared script. This has been a monumental failure by the Government. This is apparently a pledge and a commitment that they have held for a decade and a half, and we're supposed to believe none of them noticed. Not a single one realised that they had omitted to include dualling the A96 from their budget document. But what is worse is the words used by the Cabinet Secretary in the budget statement yesterday, a statement prepared and read out exactly by the Cabinet Secretary. So are we supposed to believe, and will the Cabinet Secretary, in responding to these points of orders, confirm that having read and practised her statement a number of times, not a single MSP, not a single special advisor, not a single minister said, "Hold on, Cabinet Secretary, you are changing our pledge to dual the whole road by saying you're only going to dual key parts of it"? And can the Cabinet Secretary also confirm which ministers have failed most here? Is it her as the Finance Secretary, because the supporting documents come out in her name? Is it the Transport Secretary next to her, who didn't look at the elements related to her brief? Or does it go right up to the First Minister, because we know this was his budget? They have all failed. They've let down the North East. And had it not been for the front page of the Press and Journal today, we might still be in the dark.
I thank Mr Ross for his contribution. That too is not a point of order. I have nothing to add to that in terms of my response to Mr Ewing, and I would now call a point of order from the Cabinet Secretary, Shona Robson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I thank Fergus Ewing for the opportunity to say that the infrastructure delivery pipeline sets out our commitment to dualling the A96. It lists the inches to Smithton section and the Inverness to Nairn section, including the Nairn bypass. It should have also listed the entire A96 corridor, because that is our commitment, and that is what ministers agreed when the draft document was sent to them. That is what ministers agreed when the draft document was sent to them for formal ministerial approval. So there has been one error, and we're still looking into exactly how this happened, but my understanding is it would appear to be a production error in the document. What I can say absolutely definitively is that the document has already been corrected online, and the full A96 is now included, and ministers remain absolutely committed to that project, including the Elgin bypass. And I can see from the copy here that that has indeed been corrected, and I hope that will reassure members across the chamber.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her contribution. Again, that's not a point of order, but I would imagine has been helpful for those members who have an interest in the matter. I see there is a further point of order from Douglas Ross. Mr Ross.
Thank you. It's enlightening to see the process that the Scottish Government goes through, that such a major error could be missed by every single minister. But the point that the Cabinet Secretary did not mention in her statement is the words she used in the chamber yesterday. Those words that came out of her mouth delivering her statement were that key sections of the A96 would be dualled. Is she now saying she was wrong to say that, and what measures will she take to correct the official record? Because, as Fergus Ewing says, that must be done at the earliest opportunity, and that happened earlier on this afternoon at 2 o'clock when the government admitted their mistake.
I thank Mr Ross for his further contribution, which again is not a point of order. The Cabinet Secretary is present in the chamber, has obviously heard what Mr Ross had to say, which will be on the record of the official report, and I would therefore plan now to move on to the next item of business, as I have nothing further to add as the chair of the proceedings on the matter. So there will be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business. Thank you.